The day had started in a peaceful way, the kind of morning where no one expected anything unusual to happen. The small family-run restaurant smelled of fresh bread and warm tea, and the staff moved around in a calm rhythm, setting the tables and getting ready for the busy afternoon. Among them was Maria, the maid's daughter, who worked quietly beside her mother. She was soft-spoken, polite, and always focused on helping out wherever she could. Most people who came to the restaurant barely noticed her, but those who did always saw her as a hard-working young woman who respected everyone. That day, the restaurant was visited by a familiar guest, a well-known billionaire named Mr. Saeed Rahman. He was not the type who traveled with big security teams or demanded attention. Instead, he preferred quiet places like this small restaurant, where he could enjoy a simple meal without cameras or reporters around him. Everyone in the restaurant liked him because he treated people kindly, not like someone who believed he was above others. He greeted the staff with a warm smile, and when he saw Maria and her mother working, he nodded gently as if they were longtime friends. Maria admired him from afar, not because he was wealthy, but because he always remembered people's names and never spoke harshly. Her mother had told her that true character wasn't measured by money but by how a person treated those who served them. Mr. Rahman was someone who lived by that rule every single time he visited. Maria moved around the tables with practiced ease, placing fresh glasses and wiping down surfaces. She often watched people carefully, not in a suspicious way, but because she had a habit of noticing things others ignored. Working in a restaurant taught her that small details mattered. Something as simple as a customer's expression could tell her whether they needed help or wanted to be left alone. It was during one of her rounds when she felt something unusual in the air. A group of 5 men walked into the restaurant, not speaking to one another and not even looking at the menu. They spread out, each taking a seat at different tables, but their eyes kept drifting toward the same direction, toward Mr. Rahman. Maria paused for a moment, unsure of what she was seeing. Maybe she was imagining it, she thought, but as she continued observing, she felt uneasy. Their movements were stiff, their eyes too alert, and they kept adjusting their jackets in a way that didn't seem natural. Something about their presence felt wrong. She walked to the counter where the restaurant's owner stood, preparing bills. She hesitated before speaking. "Sir, I think something is not right," she whispered. The owner glanced up with mild concern. "What happened? Is there a spill? A broken glass?" he asked. Maria shook her head slightly. "Those men, the ones who just came in, they keep staring at Mr. Rahman. They are acting strange." The owner followed her gaze but didn't look convinced. The restaurant often had customers who showed curiosity toward the billionaire because of his influence in the city. "It's normal, Maria. People know who he is. They stare sometimes. Nothing to worry about," he said reassuringly. Maria wanted to believe him, but her instincts were not quiet. She had learned over time that ignoring the small signs often led to bigger problems. Still, she respected the owner's words and returned to her duties, though her eyes kept drifting back toward the men. Her mother noticed her uneasiness as they worked side by side. "Is everything fine?" her mother asked softly. Maria nodded, not wanting to make her mother anxious. She just needed to stay alert, she told herself. Meanwhile, Mr. Rahman enjoyed his meal peacefully, completely unaware of the tension forming inside the restaurant. He spoke politely to the waiter, complimenting the food and the warm ambience. His calm presence contrasted sharply with the quiet restlessness coming from the 5 men scattered around the room. Minutes passed, and the restaurant remained steady, but Maria's suspicions grew stronger. She noticed one of the men tapping his foot repeatedly, another placing his hand inside his jacket and then pulling it out again, and a third keeping his gaze fixed on the door instead of the food in front of him. They were not behaving like normal customers. Maria's heart began to beat faster. She swallowed hard and took a deep breath. She didn't want to assume the worst, but something told her that these men did not come for food. As she went to refill water at a table, she saw 2 of the men subtly nod at each other. It wasn't the kind of nod people gave when agreeing on meal orders. It was a signal, a silent message. Her hands trembled slightly, but she continued her work, not wanting to attract attention. She needed to stay calm. She glanced toward her mother again, who seemed unaware of the growing tension but looked at Maria with a gentle smile, as if telling her not to worry. But worry was the only thing Maria felt. Suddenly, the door opened again, and a cold breeze entered the restaurant. The men's shoulders stiffened. One of them shifted in his chair, leaning forward. Another tightened his jaw. Maria's eyes widened. She couldn't hear their conversation, but she could read their body language. Whatever they were waiting for, it was close. At that moment, she understood something clearly. These men were not here by accident. The restaurant noise faded in her ears, replaced by the heavy beating of her heart. She watched as Mr. Rahman finished his tea and reached for his coat. He stood up casually, thanking the waiter for the wonderful service. He had no idea that danger was only a few steps behind him. Maria took a step forward, unable to stay still any longer. Something terrible was about to happen. She could feel it stronger than ever. She clutched the tray in her hands, not knowing what she could do, but knowing she had to stay alert. The 5 men straightened almost at the same time, their movements too coordinated to be a coincidence. They exchanged one last look, and their eyes locked onto Mr. Rahman. The peaceful day inside the restaurant was quickly slipping away. Maria's breath caught in her throat as she watched the first man rise from his seat. Then the second, then the third. She didn't know what they planned to do next, but she understood one thing. Something dangerous was coming, and she was the only one who sensed it in time. Maria stood frozen for a moment, her heartbeat loud in her ears as she watched the 5 men rise from their seats in quiet coordination. She didn't know exactly what they planned to do, but she sensed trouble deep in her bones. The atmosphere inside the restaurant changed quickly, from calm and warm to tense and uneasy, like the air before a heavy storm. The first man took a few steps toward the counter, pretending to check something on his phone. Another adjusted his jacket again, his eyes scanning the room in a sharp, calculated way. The others spaced themselves out, creating a sort of silent circle without making it obvious. No one else in the restaurant noticed anything unusual. Some customers were laughing over their meals, while others tapped on their phones, unaware of the danger approaching. Maria's mother continued working near the kitchen, humming softly as she wiped a tray. She hadn't noticed the sudden shift in the room. She trusted the restaurant owner's calm attitude and assumed everything was normal. But Maria felt anything but normal. She glanced toward Mr. Rahman again. He took his final sip of tea and placed the cup down gently. He reached for his coat, preparing to leave. He gave one last warm smile to the waiter, who thanked him for visiting once again. It was a simple, peaceful moment, but Maria knew it wouldn't stay peaceful for long. Her feet moved before her mind caught up. She slowly stepped closer, staying near enough to watch but far enough to not draw attention. She didn't have a plan. She didn't even know what she could possibly do. But her instincts demanded that she stay alert. The first man moved faster now, closing the distance between himself and the door. He peeked outside as if checking the street. Then he nodded toward the others. It was a small nod, almost invisible, but Maria saw it clearly. It was the same kind of signal she had seen earlier. Her breath caught. Something was happening. The second man stepped toward Mr. Rahman under the pretense of asking for directions. Though his expression didn't match someone needing help. His eyes were too sharp, too focused. He wasn't lost, he was waiting. Maria tightened her grip on the tray in her hands. She looked around, hoping someone else might sense what she sensed. But everyone seemed occupied in their own world. She swallowed hard. She felt both fear and determination. She didn't want anyone to get hurt, especially not someone as kind as Mr. Rahman. As Mr. Rahman slipped his coat on, the group made their move. Slow at first, careful, almost unnoticeable. They approached from different angles. One stood by the restroom door, another by the entrance, and the rest carefully positioned themselves between the tables. Maria's heartbeat quickened. She had never been so afraid in her life. She wanted to call out to her mother. She wanted to warn Mr. Rahman. But something inside her told her to stay quiet for the moment. She had to understand exactly what was happening. Her eyes darted from one man to the next, watching their movements. They didn't look like ordinary troublemakers. Their steps were too synchronized, their expressions too serious. This wasn't a random situation. Felt like something planned. Maria hesitated for a second, then took a deep breath and walked closer to her mother. She leaned in and whispered, "Something isn't right. Those men, they keep watching him." She nodded toward Mr. Ramon. Her mother looked up, surprise and concern flickering in her eyes. "Are you sure?" she whispered back. Maria nodded quickly, her eyes still scanning the room. Before her mother could reply, the restaurant door opened again. A cold breeze rushed in, brushing against Maria's skin. The sound of footsteps echoed as another customer entered. But instead of taking a seat, he stood at the entrance, looking around suspiciously before stepping aside. Maria's eyes widened. This new person didn't seem like a regular customer either. The group of men straightened instantly, like they were waiting for him. The new arrival gave them a quick look, one that carried meaning, and the men subtly adjusted their positions. Even though no words were spoken, their coordination was clear. Maria felt her stomach twist. She glanced at her mother again, who now looked truly worried. "What should we do?" her mother whispered. "I don't know yet," Maria replied softly. "But stay close." Mr. Ramon walked toward the exit slowly, as he always did. Nothing about his behavior suggested he noticed anything unusual. His gentle steps and relaxed expression remained unchanged. He nodded politely to a couple near the door before taking another step forward. The man who had entered last moved slightly, blocking a small part of the pathway. It wasn't enough to look suspicious to most people, but Maria noticed immediately. Then one of the original 5 men stepped closer too. 2 of them now stood within a few feet of Mr. Ramon. Maria's breath shortened. She glanced at the owner, hoping he might see what she saw, but he was busy settling a bill with another customer, unaware of the scene unfolding. Everything inside the restaurant felt heavier, thicker, as if the air itself was sinking. Maria sensed it fully now. They were closing in. She took another step forward, staying partially behind a wooden pillar. Her mind raced. She tried to convince herself she was mistaken, that maybe the men would simply walk past him. But every second made her more certain. They had been waiting for him to stand up. They had been waiting for this moment. One of the men looked around the restaurant one last time before signaling the others. It was a tiny signal, barely noticeable, but Maria saw it clearly. The moment the signal was given, everything changed. The men started moving at the same time, stepping into a tighter formation. Their body language shifted sharply. They lowered their heads, stepped closer to Mr. Ramon, and blocked the view from other tables. Maria's mother gasped softly when she noticed them closing in. She grabbed Maria's hand, squeezing it tight. "What are they doing?" her mother whispered, fear growing in her voice. Maria didn't answer. She couldn't. Her chest tightened, and her focus narrowed on the scene unfolding only a few steps away. Mr. Ramon noticed something only when he turned and saw a man suddenly standing too close to him. He blinked in surprise, confused at the proximity. Before he could ask anything, one of the men took a step toward him. Maria held her breath. Her heart pounded so loudly she could barely hear anything else. The entire restaurant seemed to move in slow motion. A single question thundered in her mind. Was she the only one who could stop something terrible from happening? Maria felt the world narrowing around her as she watched the men step closer to Mr. Ramon. Everything else in the restaurant, voices, clinking plates, soft music, faded into a low blur. Her eyes were locked on the scene unfolding, and her heart thumped loudly in her chest. Even breathing felt difficult. She didn't know exactly what was going to happen next, but she could feel danger thick in the air. It wrapped around her like a cold wind, warning her that something terrible was seconds away. One of the men stopped in front of Mr. Ramon, while another stepped behind him. The others positioned themselves around him, some pretending to look at menus, some acting like they were just adjusting their jackets. But Maria could see the tension in their hands, the stiffness in their shoulders. They were preparing for something. Mr. Ramon seemed confused at first. He stepped back slightly, unsure why he was suddenly surrounded. He glanced toward the restaurant owner, as if expecting him to walk over, but the owner was busy helping a customer and didn't notice anything unusual. Maria's mother stood frozen near the kitchen, her hands trembling as she watched from a distance. She looked at Maria with a worried expression, silently begging her to stay away. But Maria didn't step back. She couldn't. Her instincts were louder than her fear. The first man leaned in toward Mr. Rahman and said something quietly, too quietly for anyone else to hear. Whatever he said made Mr. Rahman's face change. He stiffened slightly, his eyes narrowing in worry. Maria clutched the tray she was holding, the edges digging into her fingers. She could feel her palms sweating. She wanted to call for help, but her voice felt trapped in her throat. The man in front of Mr. Rahman stepped closer. Then everything happened at once. Mr. Rahman reached for his phone, maybe to call someone, maybe out of reflex. But before his hand even touched his pocket, one of the men grabbed his wrist. The movement was quick and firm, not loud, not violent, but enough to show clear control. Maria gasped softly. A few customers noticed the sudden shift and paused their conversations. But no one understood what was really going on yet. To them, it might have looked like a misunderstanding or an argument. But Maria knew better. She saw the tightness of the grip, the silent signals between the men. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was planned. Another man stepped beside Mr. Rahman, subtly blocking the view from the rest of the restaurant. A third man moved toward the door, standing near it as if preparing to close it if needed. Maria felt fear rising inside her, but something else rose with it, a kind of sharp clarity. Her mind began working faster, noticing details she didn't usually pay attention to. Every movement, every glance, every shift in the air. Her hidden skill wasn't fully revealed yet, but it was beginning to awaken. The man holding Mr. Rahman's wrist leaned closer again. His voice was low, but his tone was clear, firm, demanding. Mr. Rahman tried to speak calmly, raising his free hand slightly as if to show he didn't want trouble. Maria took a step forward without thinking. Her mother saw her and whispered urgently, "Stay back! Don't get involved!" But Maria couldn't stop. She knew something serious was happening. She couldn't watch someone get cornered like that, especially someone who had always been kind to her and her family. Another man stepped behind Mr. Rahman, and Maria noticed him look toward the exit again. The one near the door returned the look. It was another silent signal. They were getting ready to move him. Maria's pulse raced. She looked around quickly at the customers, at the staff, at the entryway. No one else seemed ready to act. No one else looked like they understood the danger. She tried to breathe deeply. She knew she had to keep her mind clear. She couldn't act recklessly, but she also couldn't wait any longer. Suddenly, one of the men took a firmer grip on Mr. Rahman's arm. Not rough, but forceful enough to make him wince. That small reaction from Mr. Rahman shattered the last of Maria's hesitation. She moved forward. Not fast, not suddenly, but with steady steps that didn't draw much attention. She blended in with the movement of the restaurant, pretending to clear tables as she moved closer. She approached a nearby table and placed the tray down quietly, her hands trembling slightly. She needed both hands free. Her breathing grew heavier, but her eyes stayed sharp. One of the men suddenly turned his head and looked directly at her. Maria froze. Their eyes locked for a long second. His gaze was cold, suspicious. For a moment, she thought he might shout or push her away. But then someone across the room dropped a spoon, and the sharp clatter broke the moment. The man turned away again, focusing back on Mr. Rahman. Maria exhaled quietly, relief washing over her, but only for a second. Because now the men started guiding Mr. Rahman toward the door. It looked almost polite, like they were escorting him. But Maria saw the truth in the tightness of their grip, in the urgency of their steps. They were moving him out of the restaurant. Once he was outside, anything could happen. Maria's mind raced faster now. She knew she couldn't shout. She didn't want to scare anyone or push the situation into panic. She needed to act carefully. She looked at her mother, who stood frozen with wide, desperate eyes. "Don't!" Her mother mouthed silently, but Maria had already made her decision. She stepped closer again, this time quicker. She moved to the side of a table near the exit, pretending to adjust a chair. She positioned herself near enough to listen but not close enough to be noticed. She heard the man near the door say quietly, "Now." The one holding Mr. Rahman nodded and tightened his grip. Maria's breath caught. This was the moment everything was going to change. Then, in a split second, Mr. Rahman tried to pull his arm free. It wasn't a forceful attempt, just a small effort to break away. But the men reacted instantly, surrounding him more tightly. The restaurant owner finally looked up, noticing the sudden cluster of bodies near the door. He frowned and started walking toward them, but he was too far to understand what was happening. Maria watched with growing fear as the men prepared to step fully outside with Mr. Rahman trapped between them. The world felt like it was spinning, yet her mind was sharper than ever. Her hidden skill, the part of her she kept secret for so long, was ready to surface. She didn't know exactly what she would do, but she knew she could no longer stay still. Something inside her, strong, brave, determined, pushed her forward. The moment the men reached the doorway with Mr. Rahman, Maria stepped forward too. Her life was about to change, and so was everyone else's. Here is part 4 written in simple English with a natural tone, and keeping the story engaging. The next morning came quietly, but the tension from the night before still hung in the air like a thick cloud. The waitress woke up early, her mind running with thoughts she could not ignore. She kept thinking about the billionaire, how he had walked out of the restaurant without saying a single word after hearing her speak Arabic. She didn't know what that meant for her job, her future, or the strange connection she suddenly felt between them. She had never expected her language skills to matter in this way, and now everything felt uncertain. She reached the restaurant before the sun had fully risen. The chairs were still upside down on the tables, and the smell of cleaning spray lingered in the room. She set her bag down, tied her apron, and tried to focus on the routine tasks that usually grounded her. But her hands moved slowly, and her thoughts kept drifting. The door opened earlier than usual, and her coworker stepped inside with a curious look. He had been there the night before and had witnessed the billionaire's shock. He leaned against the counter and watched her arrange the menus. "You think he's coming back?" he asked softly. She gave a small shrug. "I don't know. I didn't expect him to react like that, to be honest." "Maybe he was surprised you understood him," her coworker said. "Most people would be." She nodded. She knew many customers assumed she only spoke her native language and English. People rarely imagined she had learned Arabic from her grandfather, who used to tell her stories for hours when she was a child. Those memories were warm, comforting. But last night's moment had been anything but calm. As the morning continued, customers started coming in. She tried her best to stay focused, but every time the door opened, her heart jumped a little. She wasn't nervous about the billionaire himself. What she feared was the unknown, what he might do next. Wealthy people had the power to make things difficult or easy in ways ordinary people didn't. Around midday, when the restaurant was buzzing with noise, the door slowly opened again. She didn't look immediately. She was balancing 2 plates in her hands, but when she turned, she froze. The billionaire stood near the entrance, wearing a calm expression that didn't match the sharp shock she had seen on his face the night before. Today he looked composed, almost thoughtful. Her coworker noticed him too and whispered under his breath, "He's back." She steadied her hands and placed the plates on a nearby table before walking toward him. She didn't want to seem anxious or awkward. "Welcome back," she said, keeping her voice polite. He nodded once. "Thank you." There was a pause, short but heavy. "Same table?" she asked. He hesitated, then quietly said, "Yes." As she led him to the table, she could feel other customers glancing over. People always noticed him. His presence naturally drew attention. When he sat down, he looked at her with a mix of curiosity and something else she couldn't read. She handed him the menu. "Let me know when you're ready." Before she could take a step back, he spoke. "You speak Arabic very well." Her heart skipped. She turned slightly. "Thank you. I learned it when I was young." He studied her face. Last night, I said something unkind. She didn't answer. She didn't want to make this harder for him or herself. He continued, his voice low. I should not have spoken about you like that. She took a breath. It's okay. I'm used to people assuming things. It doesn't make it acceptable. She looked at him again. His expression wasn't arrogant anymore. It wasn't harsh. There was a softness she hadn't seen in him before. I appreciate you saying that, she said quietly. He nodded, then lowered his eyes to the menu. While he ordered, she felt a strange shift between them. The distance she had felt the night before seemed to be shrinking. Something like understanding began to form, fragile but real. When she brought his food, he asked, You work here full-time? Yes, she replied. Morning to evening most days. He tapped a finger lightly on the table. You must be very dedicated. It's not really about dedication, she said with a faint smile. It's about responsibility. He studied her carefully. You support your family? She nodded. My younger brother. He's still in school. The billionaire didn't say anything for a moment, and she could see something shift in his posture. He seemed to understand the weight she carried. Do you ever rest? He asked softly. She laughed a little. When the restaurant closes early. For the first time he smiled. Just a small, quick expression, but it softened his whole face. As the day went on, the restaurant filled and emptied, but he stayed longer than he had before. He watched the way she moved between tables, how she spoke kindly to every customer, how she never rushed or grew irritated. She never put herself at the center of attention, but somehow she made everyone feel seen. After finishing his meal, he waited until she returned to clear the table. I want to ask you something, he said. She looked at him carefully. Okay. He clasped his hands together. If someone judged you without knowing your story, would you tell them, or would you ignore it? She paused. The question felt personal, almost too personal. But she answered honestly. I don't think people need to know everything about me. But if they misunderstand me and I have a chance to clear it, then yes, I would. He nodded slowly, as if her words settled something inside him. I judged you, he said. She stayed silent. And you corrected me. Not rudely, not angrily, just clearly. She shrugged gently. I just wanted you to know I understood you. That's all. He held her gaze for a long moment. It meant more than you think. Before he could say anything else, someone called her name from across the room. She excused herself and stepped away quickly to handle another table. But as she worked, she could feel his eyes following her. Not in a strange or uncomfortable way, but in a thoughtful one. When she finally returned to his table, he had already stood up. I might come back again, he said. She nodded politely. You're always welcome. He paused, then added, Thank you, for yesterday, and for today. She watched him leave, unsure of what any of this meant. But something told her that this was not the end. His apology, his questions, his long silence before leaving. None of it felt casual. As the door closed behind him, she turned back to her work, but her thoughts drifted again. She didn't know what was coming next, but she could feel the story shifting, and for the first time she wasn't afraid of it. The moment the police took the last man away, the restaurant finally grew quiet again. For a few seconds, no one said anything. People were still trying to understand what had just happened. The chairs were pushed aside, cups had fallen on the floor, and a few plates lay broken. But the only thing anyone could look at was the young girl standing in the middle of it all, the maid's daughter who had done something none of them could ever imagine. Maria felt her hands shaking. She had moved on instinct, not thinking, not planning. She didn't even fully understand how she had reacted so quickly. She only knew that when she saw the billionaire being taken away by force, something inside her snapped. She couldn't let it happen. Not in front of her. Not while she was standing right there and able to help. Her mother hurried to her side and wrapped her arms around her. Are you hurt? She asked again and again, touching her face and arms. Maria shook her head softly and said she was fine, but her mother's worry didn't fade. She kept holding her daughter like she was afraid she might break. Mr. Rahman walked toward them slowly. His steps were unsteady, and his breathing was still sharp, but he was safe. His clothes were a little messy, and his face had a bruise forming on one side, yet he looked calmer than before. When he reached Maria, he stopped a short distance away, unsure if he should speak first. "Thank you," he said quietly. His voice was gentle but carried a depth of emotion that made everyone fall silent again. He wasn't the kind of man who liked making dramatic speeches, but this moment wasn't ordinary. "You saved my life today. I don't know how to repay something like that." Maria didn't know what to say. She had never been the center of attention, not even in school. She preferred to stay quiet, finish her tasks, keep her head down, and avoid problems. Now every eye was on her. "I just did what I had to do," she said softly. She looked down, embarrassed. Anyone would have helped, but the customers shook their heads. They knew that wasn't true. Not anyone would step in against 5 grown men. Not anyone would risk getting hurt. Not anyone would remain so calm while everyone else panicked. Someone even whispered, "She's a hero," and others nodded. Her mother wiped her tears and held Maria's hand tightly, as if afraid someone might try to take her away. Mr. Rahman smiled gently. "You didn't just help me, Maria. You protected everyone in this room. You saw danger before anyone else. You stayed calm. You acted when no one else did." The restaurant owner stepped forward. "I'm proud of you," he said sincerely. He had known Maria since she was a child. He had seen her helping her mother clean tables, carrying plates bigger than her arms, studying quietly in corners when customers weren't around. "I don't think anyone will forget today." Maria's face heated with embarrassment again. She didn't want praise. She didn't want to feel special. She only wanted everyone to be safe. A few minutes later, police officers returned to ask questions. They needed statements, details, descriptions. But when they spoke to Maria, they treated her with respect. One officer even said, "You managed to stop something that could have ended very badly. You were brave." After the officers left, people slowly returned to their tables or stepped outside to talk with others. Some wanted to understand what had happened, while others simply needed air. But no one left without looking back at Maria at least once. When things finally began to settle, Mr. Rahman asked if he could speak to her privately. Her mother stayed by her side, and they all sat at a table away from the noise. "Maria," he began, "I want to understand something. How did you do all that?" She took a slow breath. "I learned self-defense at a community center near my home," she explained. "They offered free evening classes. I used to go after helping my mother at work. I kept practicing for years." "And you never told anyone?" her mother asked, still surprised. Maria looked down. "I didn't want people to think I was strange, or that I was trying to act tough. I learned it so I could protect myself. And maybe protect you, Mama. That's all." Her mother's eyes softened. She squeezed Maria's hand and whispered, "You protected more than just me today." Mr. Rahman listened quietly, his eyes thoughtful. Finally, he spoke again. "I have a foundation that supports young people with unique skills and strong discipline. We help them train, study, and grow into careers that fit their strengths." Maria lifted her eyes slightly, unsure what he meant. "I want to help you," he said. "Not because I owe you, though I do, but because you deserve a chance to use your talent in a way that changes your future." Her mother looked stunned. "Sir, she is only a girl from a simple home." "That has nothing to do with it," he said firmly. "Talent doesn't belong to one class or one kind of family. It can appear anywhere. Many people have hidden strength, but only a few have the courage to use it at the right moment." Maria didn't speak. She didn't know what to say. Her dreams were never big. She wanted a better life, but she didn't dare imagine more than small steps. Maybe finishing her studies, maybe finding a steady job, maybe helping her mother live more comfortably. "Take your time to think," Mr. Rahman said kindly. "There is no pressure, but the offer will stay open for as long as you need." He placed a card gently on the table. It had a phone number and an address. Nothing flashy, Simple, just like the person he was. Her mother whispered, "This is a blessing." But Maria still felt overwhelmed. Everything had changed so fast. When the restaurant closed for the night, the remaining staff gathered around Maria. They hugged her, patted her shoulders, and told her how grateful they were. They shared stories of how scared they had been and how safe they felt when she stepped in. Even customers who had returned to get their forgotten belongings thanked her. One woman said she would tell her children about her. Another man bowed respectfully before leaving. Maria tried to smile through it all. She appreciated their words, but deep inside, she still felt like the same quiet girl she had always been. When she and her mother finally walked home, the streets were calm. The air felt cool and fresh after such a long day. Her mother held her arm, not because she feared anything now, but because she was proud. "I always knew you had strength," she said softly. "But today, you showed a strength even you didn't know you had." Maria looked around at the quiet houses, the dim streetlights, the soft glow coming from windows where families sat together. She knew life would not go back to the way it was before. Something had changed inside her. She felt more confident, more aware of what she could do. "Mama," she whispered, "do you think I should accept his offer?" Her mother stopped walking and turned toward her. "I think," she said gently, "that you should follow the path that lets your heart grow. You helped someone today. Maybe this is the beginning of something bigger. Something good." Maria nodded slowly. They continued walking home under the peaceful night sky. And as they walked, she realized something. She wasn't afraid anymore. Not of being seen. Not of being misunderstood. Not of dreaming bigger. She had stepped forward once in a moment of danger. Now she was ready to step forward for her own future. That night, as she lay in bed, she held the card Mr. Rahman had given her. Her heart beat calmly, not with fear but with hope. She didn't know what the future held. But she knew one thing for certain. The world would no longer see her as just the maid's daughter. They would remember her as the girl with the hidden skill, the girl who changed everything with one brave choice.